Hello, everybody. This is Founder Layron with the Fantasy Grounds Academy. Going to go over a couple changes that have just occurred within the Fantasy Grounds Unity platform. Just some added features that they've been working on for a while. These are in response to some things that they wanted to add, and also the sidebar menu has changed where you can collapse it a little bit more. They have added in the functionality of calculating gold weight, so you won't have to have an extension or come up with a creative way to do that if you don't want to. And then there's some other little fixes under the hood too that they've done, which I won't go into, but nonetheless, let's take a look and see what they've done to it. So before I get into the line of sight stuff, I wanted to let you know that the description for the maps, the information about map tools and line of sight will be in the description in the video at the end. And then any of the changes that occurred are going to be in the main file patch notes. So this is kind of a major change. I wouldn't say it's a huge change, but it is a new revision. So at the very bottom, you'll notice an arrow key in the map tools or in the toolbar area. You can actually collapse that now, and you can expand these bars how you want, which is kind of what it was doing before. But then on the bottom, you can also squeeze that in where you can't really read the actual titles, but you still have the symbol. So that's a welcome addition. And then you can collapse even further to where it's just a symbol all the way to the far right. So it just depends on your needs and such, but you can basically collapse this sidebar down to three different settings. So here's the main setting, and here's like halfway basically, and then there's a single column. So you can do a lot of customization on the toolbar as far as that goes. So that's a nice change. I think this was in response to the community kind of giving them grief about the changes that they'd made a couple of months back. It's a step in the right direction for sure. Going straight into the settings. So if you go into the gear icon and you look at the house rules, you'll notice that they added the actual function of using currency weight. So there's an option called party use currency weight. So its default is on, but if you want to turn it off, it'll behave as it had before. But if you want to include coin weight, you turn it on and it will calculate for that. They've also changed the way this map diagonal distance is read. So raw movement is basically when you move your token, it'll keep track of every little single movement. Times one is basically, or one times is basically, it's only going to count every square, and it's not going to, count every other square. And then if you do 1.5 times, that's where it's going to count every other diagonal square. So that they kind of clarified it's pretty much the same settings. They just clarified it in the menu. And then that's pretty much the majority of the changes. There's a lot of things to do with the dice roller and those sort of things. But I just wanted to mention that before I get going in case you stumble on this in the future and you wonder why it looks different. That is basically the only visual thing I can really see right now is the actual tool sidebar. There might be some other things I'm missing, but if you go back and read the actual link in the description, it will take you to the patch notes. So I made sure I put that in there. So today I'm going to focus on the Gauntlet that I'm working on, which is going to be designed as a one-shot sort of a training tool, a way to get people familiar with some of the key functions in Fantasy Grounds. It's going to take a lot of thought. I think it'll be a lot of fun to run it, and it will also kind of become my staple that I'm going to use to help people go through Fantasy Grounds and teach them how to use the content. I've already paid for the maps. I commissioned these from Mopsy a while back ago. He agreed to make these for me for this particular module. So if I open up my decal here, what this is basically the GM's version of the map. So it doesn't have any line of sight or anything on it. It's just a kind of an overview map of all the maps when they're put together. So what I'll do is when I'm done with the maps, I'll link them to each one of these sections. And if I want to jump to that specific battle map, I'll be able to get to it easier. So this is kind of an overview, like a preview, and then it will link to each separate map. So speaking of separate maps, there are basically 4 major ones. So if I go into the images banner and I pull up the maps, there's the main maps here. So here's map number 1, which is already has some kind of mist on it, and then it probably has some line of sight on there already. I think I did this in a previous episode. Map number 2 hasn't been worked on yet. So what I would do with these generally, especially if I was going to play, is stretch these out to what size that I want the windows to show up. So when I open these maps up, I want them to size to this particular dimension every time. And when I close the map, I can actually right click again and hit zoom to fit, and it will fit in that parameter in that space. The next map is the top right corner of the Gauntlet, basically. Each one of these has like puzzles and encounters and that sort of thing that I have to build. So this will also be something I might be showing in the show so that people get familiar with how to kind of do their own homebrew stuff. So this is another map. It's pretty complicated. You got doors here, you got traps. There's all kinds of things that can go wrong in here. It's a lot of fun. So we'll see how this turns out. But there's a water trap in here. Looks like there's steam and fire. So Mopsy and I were discussing these over the weeks about how we're going to make this happen. The next thing is the part 4 or section 4, which is kind of an open area, but it has some tactical challenges. This is going to be basically like a final boss fight, sort of. And if you ever played on Rob's table, he used to do the player versus player thing. It has some kind of elements to that, but it's not really PvP. It's cooperation. But there's this sludge. This is actually like a mildly toxic, acidic, swampy kind of river. And then you have these platforms that you can climb up and cross the river from. And you can also jump across these different areas. So it just depends on what's happening. But all the maps connect to each other, but these are separate, and I'm going to treat them as separate maps. So I'm going to go back to the first map. So I'm going to close these. And this was the first map that I was working on. If I go and I unlock a map, and this would occur with, any map that you have that's not copyright protected, you can unlock them. And most of them are anyways. And it looks like I just have a layer of mist, and it's kind of blowing across here. So what you can do with this is an effects layer. So if I go to the effects layer itself, which is the effects button up here on top, and then I click on that layer, it's going to bring me to the actual page. So I might turn down the mist just a little bit, down to 60 or about 68, 70%. So the visibility is still kind of there. And then the speed of it, I'm going to turn that down to about 52, and that should slow it down a little. So that's kind of a breezy area that you can go across. Now, the tricky part of this is multi-level. So these bottom pieces down here are actually lower than the rest of the map. So what I might do is fill the rest of this in with a trap. So that's probably my next step, is to come in here, and I'm going to make these little pockets basically traps. So that anything that's not inside of these walkways are going to be traps. And then that means if you fall in there, you can't get back out until I let you out. So that will force me to say, okay, you're going to have to make a save or something like that. So there's going to be a challenge here. There'll probably be some kobolds or a low-level creature or something that flies, and that will harass the player. So I was thinking about doing maybe 3 kobolds and 1 flying kobold, and have them use missile weapons. And they're basically going to be hampering the party's ability to get through this area. So they have to start over here in the bottom left corner and make their way up to the exit, which I believe is this platform up here. So that's something they'll have to complete. But if I bring up the master map here, yeah, see, this is where the exit is actually. So this is where the kobolds will probably originate around in here somewhere. And then there's some pretty cool features, like there's a waterfall, and these again are kind of like earth moats or kind of like floating cloud, or maybe they're cliff faces that come off the edge of a very wide chasm. And then these walls are super thick and they're solid. You can't fly over them. They're basically they have some kind of shield or something around it, so you can't just go fly over the wall to the next area. And you can't teleport either. So it's a gauntlet that you have to go through in order to finish it. So it's not really going to be meant to necessarily be played entirely through, but it is going to be something that you can use to challenge your players. And they're going to have all kinds of role-playing puzzles. I mean, there's going to be skill checks. So this first map is going to focus mostly on skill checks. There will be a little bit of combat, but not too much, just to kind of get people used to the idea that they'll be under duress and they'll be getting messed with. So that's what we're going to do. So what I was talking about earlier about pinning the maps to this master map is something you could do in Fantasy Grounds, which is kind of important if you're going to be doing your own regional maps and such. So if you have a larger map that you need to show like where all your individual maps are, what I can do with that is actually take this map here, which is this top or this bottom left corner, and I'm going to just take this and drag and drop it onto the map here, and that will actually shortcut this to this map that's underneath it. So that way I have quick access to it, and I'm not constantly having to open it up. So if I click that little pin, it's actually going to bring up this map. So this is something that you might want to do with some of your maps, is kind of pin them back and forth so that when you need to get back to somewhere quicker, it will be, much easier. And then I'm going to do the same thing, like over here in the top right corner. This is where you actually complete the map. So if you look at this main map, it shows where this actually ends. So it's right at the edge here. So when this is over, you're going to be right here starting to go into the next area. So this is something you could do. You can pin the next map here so that when you get to that point, you're not digging around for the map. You're actually going to find it. So I will take that advice, my own advice, and pull up that map. So if I go to my images folder, map number 2 is there. So what I'm going to do is link map number 2 to this area so that I don't have to look for it later. So if I grab the shortcut and drag and drop it onto this map, this will be a direct link straight over to this map. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this map. On the bottom right corner here, where the maps actually connect, I'm going to put a link to this first map on there. So they're going to be linked back and forth. So take this and link it onto this other map and bring the link over to where it's actually going to connect to the other map. That way, if you come to this map and you have to go back or something, you can always click this and it'll bring the old map back. So it's helpful to have these links between different maps. The other thing I might do for convenience is to place the master map link on the individual maps. So on the top left corner, I will probably just link these together. That way I don't have to worry about finding that map again and bringing it back out. So what I will do is take the master map and I will just top left link them so that when I am in this map, I can basically pull this master map up. So if I take this and drag and drop it over here, that's going to be my default area. And I'm going to do the same thing on this map as well. So I'm going to recenter this by clicking on this little toolbar drop down and then clicking on this arrow, which is going to recenter the map. There's the link to the other map, but I want to put the link to the master map onto this map as well to make it more convenient for me. So this map here, the preview map, is going to basically be linked on this top left corner like I did with the other one. That way you can find it later. So I gotta move that out of the way, bring this over, and this is temporary. You just do this until you get them linked together, and then you can position them where you want. So this link here is going to go up here on the upper left corner, so that way I can easily access this regional map. And then this is kind of like your overview map. your GM's map, and then the other map is going to be, just for the players and the tokens and such. And if I have any encounters or anything like that, I'm going to link them into this area. So if I have any traps or any sort of NPCs or tables or anything like that, I'm going to link them on this master map, but I'll also link them in here so that it's convenient when I'm playing. I can just pop it right up. It's not going to take me an hour and a day just to find it. So I'm back on the big main master map. So the only thing I've done here is add a little bit of this fog of war type thing. It looks like I have to add a little bit more. So in this mask layer, I can go to reveal area, or you can go to hide area. So I'm going to actually go to reveal. I'm going to reveal this area here because that doesn't need to be there, that line. There's some stuff here that I noticed that I want to add that should be shadowed. So there's a little bit of touch up here that I want to do prior to doing anything else. And it's the same with this over here. So it's just a little bit of touch up, nothing major. Just a way to get this cleaned up. Yeah, see, I did that wrong. So I want to put this on. There we go. So the mist layer is actually going over some of this area below. So if you see that, that's by design. It's not fully going over it, but it is definitely kind of hampering the vision. So that's that. Now, what I want to do is take these areas that are basically not really land. It's like basically a drop off. And I'm going to add some kind of line of sight, which will probably just be a terrain tool, or in this case, I'm going to use a trap because that's what basically how you can make it set up to where if they accidentally move and fall off the cliff, they're going to have to ask for permission to move their token. So I'm going to make that a thing. It's just kind of like a challenge for them to move around this map without falling. That's going to be the main challenge. I think, doing skill checks such as athletics and acrobatics and working as a team, they might be able to use their equipment and use these ropes to get back and forth between different areas. So it just depends on the situation. But that's definitely something I'm going to have to keep in mind. So I don't know exactly how I want to do this, but what I think I'm going to do is these layers that are on top. What I might do is make those separate islands. So I'll make a layer here, and then I'll make another one here with just the tool, basically the layer for the terrain. But the real thing is this bottom layer where there's no land. That's where I want to put the actual trap data. So I'm going to start with that and then kind of take a look and see where I'm at on that. So the trap area is just this area here that doesn't really have any land. So if they fall, they're not going to be able to just grab onto anything. And as you can see, there's different levels of it. So I'm just going to cover all the areas because there's still going to be a drop off or a fall regardless of where they go. And then you see here, it kind of goofed this up. So I'm going to fix that I'm going to hide this area actually. There we go. And that'll help with that. And then if you want to reveal the area, you change that filter over there. And then you make it like this. And see, as you can tell, it's going to take out some of that excess lines so that you can put in your trap data, and you can also have your mist where you want it to show up, basically. So these are just different areas that I'm unmasking or masking depending on your needs. So this is just something you could do to your maps to make them more interesting and to make them have some more dynamicnesses to it. All right, so that's basically the gist of this map here. It's not going to be very detailed, but it will have some features that will challenge the players. I think, like I said, skill checks, any sort of stat-based or group-based or the help action, just kind of give them a good run for their money so they can kind of see how Fantasy Grounds works. I think that's the best use of this type of gauntlet here, is to have the players run through it with their characters and see how they do. And it uses different aspects of the game so that they get used to, using their character sheets. Is kind of what this boils down to, is, getting the players used to how do you use Fantasy Grounds. And one of the things that I think we kind of are remiss on is we a lot of us have been playing for a while. We understand how it works, but not everyone gets it right away. So it's nice to be able to give people some content to look at and say, oh, okay, that's how you do it. Sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words. Sometimes it's easier to describe it than show it. Just depends on the situation. But this is definitely more of a show and tell type thing that we're going to use during the Gauntlet. So Gauntlet's going to help us provide players with an overview of this particular rule set. You can use this in Pathfinder or any of the other rule sets that are kind of fantasy based. I'm going to use the 5th edition rule set because that's the one I'm most familiar with, but I could essentially do the same thing in any rule set. It's going to be 4 characters. So they're no more than 4, no less. So we're going to run through this Gauntlet. I'm going to have 4 pre-gens, and that's going to make it so that when players are actually on the game board, they don't have to make any characters. I might make a couple variations just in case people want a little bit more variety. Maybe I'll make 8 characters total, but kind of wanted to keep it simple because when you start adding in all these other variables, it can really make this complex. So that is basically, I'm going to start putting in the actual data for the trap. So in the line of sight tool, which is this brick wall up here on the top, I'm going to go to the line tool, and then I'm going to click on the pit function. And the only pit area really in this area is over here on the right-hand side. And as you can see, it looks like I got some areas that I need to mask. So let's do that first. So this is actually unmasking. So this area is that. And then I'm just going to unmask little parts of this. Doesn't have to be perfect, but it gives you an idea of where the separation is between the line of sight and all the other areas. So that's basically just this little area. And I'm going to put the pit tool in there. So I'm going to go back to the line of sight tool, go to the line tool, and then I'm on the pit tool. I'm going to hold down the Alt key and to just trace where I want this to go. So this is going to just be like that. I mean, it's really not as critical as some other maps. So click here, click there, and just kind of come along here and take this and stretch it out over here, come around here, and then I'm just going to bring this out kind of like a natural feature for this waterfall. It's really not that critical, like I was saying earlier, but you can get the idea of how this works. So if they fall in this area, it basically means they fell. So if they get knocked off this platform, or they get pushed, or maybe there's more than 2 people going across here, that could be an issue. You can always go back and fix the lines once you place them. So like this is kind of crooked. My advice to you on something like this is get all of the areas done first, then go back and make your adjustments. If you do this as you go, it's going to take you a lot longer because you're switching back and forth between the tools. So I'm in the drawing tool right now, and I'm going to stay there until I'm a lot further along. So I'm going to go ahead and make the tool here for the falling in the pit. The only thing that I might have a problem with is the rope. So I might have to break these up into separate groups and leave a little spot here so that if they climb across there, they're not going to constantly be stuck in the pit. So I might have to break this up in half. And it's something I didn't anticipate when I first had these maps made, but I like the idea of having these ropes. So what I could just make it a pit and just kind of wing it and say, okay, you made it across, that sort of thing. But I kind of want to give them an opportunity to move their tokens too. So actually, I'll just make this a pit, and then when I need them to do it, you can toggle this so that they can move. You can have it block movement, and you can have it toggleable, so you can turn it on or off. So that might be an option. I'll just do that. I don't want to make this too complex. So again, I'm in the line tool, and I'm in the pit tool. I'm just going to make this area in here. This whole area is going to be a pit. So I'm going to trace around these contours, which is going to represent some of the ledges and such in here, and then just kind of carry that through. So not a big deal. So I'm going to start in this little corner and just click over here until I get to this side. And then I'm going to go all the way up to where it hits this this bridge-like thing, or this little stand that you can stand on, and then just kind of come through here and use the contour as best I can. So here's a little patch of land that exists just because of the natural formation. So as you can see, there's an area here that you can kind of stand on, maybe for one person, but I wouldn't count on it too much, because this gauntlet isn't going to be very friendly. So we'll see how it goes. But go ahead and put this there. Come down. So I can always go back and fix those lines if I don't really like where they went. Because as you can see, that's a little bit too far out, but I'm not gonna stress on it. I want to get the rough idea of the terrain and the line of sight in here, and where the pit's actually going to exist, and then go from there. It's not a rocket science. I mean, just basically placing this stuff as effectively as possible without having to create another area. It's kind of what I'm trying to do. So it doesn't have to be perfect. And actually, the less of these data points, the better. So if you've used Fantasy Grounds for a while, you'll realize that the more of these data points that you put in Fantasy Grounds, like these dots that I'm making, the more calculations the Fantasy Ground has to make. And that can slow it down a little bit and cause some lag. So you want to be careful with how many of these dots you put in there. You don't have to have them over every little single feature. So I'm just kind of going through and putting this in so that when they cross and if they fall off the edge, it takes them there. So this whole section right here is basically where they could fall in. And I went around some of this contour here. So anything that was darker or more visible, I made that a ledge that they can actually step on. It's probably less than 10 feet down. But anything farther than that, like these are probably only 5 feet down from the platform. But like these that are more faded, these might be 10 feet down. So that would pose a damage if they fell down and they didn't make their save or their ability checks. So I'm going to do the same thing in this area. This is going to be one big pit. So again, I'm in the drawing tool for line and the pit. Just going to go through and use the contours of the map. In some cases, it's going to be the platform. Other cases, not. So it just depends on where you're at in this area. And you can leave it up to, it's up to you where you want these to go. There's no set parameter. I mean, some of it's obvious where you'd probably want to put it, but some of these you can kind of guess if it's going to be something you're going to use or not. And all I'm doing is just kind of going around the map and plugging these values. And then you notice I don't need any links in between the straight lines. So that's something you can eliminate. You don't want a line in every little area. So this is partially terrain here, so I'm going to allow for that for an area for people to walk on. And it's just an interesting way to dress the map so that it's got some funness to it. It's not predictable. It's got some kind of hazard to it, and then there's all kinds of areas that you can fall. So the threat of death is pretty high in this. So even though it's the easiest area, it has the highest fatality rate, and that's because if you fall and you don't get help, or you can't fly, or you don't have the ability to to make it, you can actually die the first round if you're not careful. So, and I make that clear to the players when they join this map. I'm going to say, look, this area is not as easy as it looks, even though it's, it's just kind of like a big platform area. Think of it like, like Super Mario and Sonic the Hedgehog. You got to jump over some of these areas. There's going to be obstacles. You're going to have a couple of kobolds and a winged kobold flying around harassing you. And then you're going to have to, make your checks. You might get disadvantaged depending on what's going on. So there's that area. And I'm going to come up here and do the same thing. So this little area is going to be by itself. So again, I'm in the line tool and the pit, just so in case you tuned in late. Just going to click on these areas and go ahead and make them part of this area. And then this here has a little bit of contour, so I'm going to go ahead and allow for that. But that's just one little pit area there. Now this one area up here in the north, or on the top of the map, is going to be another big pit area. So this whole section here. So I'm going to take, and again, I'm in the map tools in the pit area. Just kind of take these lines and make them kind of line up with some of this contour here of the landscape. In some cases, I'll let them use the landscape. In other cases, not. Depends on how high up it is or how far away it is below. And this is kind of an area that sticks out, so they can potentially land there and break their fall, basically. They still might take a little damage, so I might have to make some hazards that's going to deal some damage to make it more convenient for me. So that'll probably be after I get all the maps of line of sight done. I'm going to go and build all the encounters. And that some of it will be traps, some of it will be NPCs, just whatever you need to do to make the map happen. And then I'm going to use this area here also because there's a waterfall here. So this will be a little bit of a pit area, not much, but there'll be some there. So I'm going to take and click on these corners. Let's see. So that is going to be basically like this. There we go. So that is basically the pit area. So when a token moves across there, they'll have problems moving through here. And by the way, there's already a grid on the map. So if you go to the grid, I already have like this yellowish kind of color. You can change that grid color. I might bump it up a little bit so that you can see the grid a little bit better. But that's basically already on there. So the grid's set. I have a little bit of line of sight on here. What I might do is take these platforms here that are up higher and make those actual terrain features and leave these little geode areas as the main level. So I think that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to go to the line of sight and I'm going to click on this little Christmas tree, which is a terrain tool, and do the same thing I did, but it's not going to cover all these areas, just these upper parts. So I'm going to call these upper. So anything that's not on the geode level, where all the grass is basically, is going to be an upper level. And those are going to have a little bit of blocking so that you can't see unless you're actually up on top. So I'm going to take that and add in some line of sight data, some occluders. So again, just kind of clicking on the edge here, not really worried too much about where these lines are, just kind of give a rough idea of where this is going to end up. So that's one area. And then this like square right here, I'll use the square tool because that's pretty simple to put that in. So if I grab and just drag and drop that like this, maybe, I don't know. Yep. And then there's these ramps that connect. I think I will erase that actually. So Control Z. So that actually undoes what I've just done. So I'm going to go to the line tool and just make this one big section so I can turn it on or off all at once instead of pieces of it. So this is not attached to that level. It's just these wooden parts. So this is just kind of a rough idea of what sorts of things that you might come across when you're doing these line of sight activities. So these are just ways to get all this in, get it connected, make it so where when your players are moving around on the map, they can't see every little bit of it. They can only see parts of it. So that's why I'm adding this particular layer, because it's going to represent a taller or a higher layer than the original landscape part of it. So these are raised up probably 10 feet or so, or at least 5 anyways. I think I'm going to make them like 5 or 10 feet. I haven't decided yet. Probably just 5 feet so that you know, it's easy to climb up. But there again, I'm going to make sure that I have the occluders on here, and it's only going to show the content that is on that level. So that's why I'm doing it this way. So when you get on this level, I will turn it on so that you'll be able to see the rest of the map. But if you're down here where this terrain is and these ramps, that's where it changes. So that's that. So I got another area here. This has actually got 2 areas. This area is just sitting up higher, and then this area here isn't as high. So this is just going to be a smaller area. So I'm just going to click here and here. Just make this kind of shift in here. So that's just a little platform there. Over here, same thing. This is another platform. So kind of reminds me of Sonic the Hedgehog or something like that. So this is just a way to illustrate that, you know, you can't see everything unless you're at that level. So I'm going to assume that some of these levels are higher than the rest. Oops, what the hell happened there? Yeah, something happened where I accidentally clicked on it or something, but I just hit Control Z to get out of that. Didn't lose a lot of work, so Control Z was good there. But you got to be careful with Control Z. One of the things that people had done early on is they would click Control Z, they wouldn't be patient, and Fantasy Grounds wouldn't update right away, and then it would, you know, they would cause them to get rid of a bunch of work. And now they've kind of cleaned up the caching on it, so it's not as slow. So I don't think that's as big of an issue anymore. But again, here, oops, see, that just did it again. It just kind of hopped over. Must be accidentally clicking on something and not realizing it. But there we go. So there's that. And then this little platform right here is kind of the same type of thing. So there are areas that are taller than the main platform areas. So that's why I'm doing that. So this again is another spot. The areas that are taller than the main level. And what are these? Are these taller? Yeah, so these areas here are taller. They're like little platforms. So this might be where I put the kobolds, is they're kind of going to be hard to reach. And the players may not necessarily get to attack them because they got to, unless they have missile weapons and spells. So that's something you got to keep in mind when they're playing. Is, you know, got to ration out their supplies, or they might run out of ammo. So it just depends. So that's that. So these are just the higher areas in the map. So that's why I have that terrain there. The lower areas will still show. You know, if you're walking on these lower ramps, you'll be able to see all that data. But if you're walking on top, you won't be able to see that unless you are actually up there. So if you go to line of sight and you go to the play mode and we lock the map, we can see where the zones are for the actual pits. And then we can see the line of sight data for the raised platforms. So that's what we've done there. So that's pretty much majority of this map. So this isn't a lot of really complicated stuff. It's just a matter of putting the time in to do it. So any questions? Nope, no questions yet, huh? Okay. Well, basically that's what I wanted to show for today. I'm going to do all the rest of the maps when I can, but for right now, just to show you how this works, I'm going to close that. You want to have like an NPC or a player in the combat tracker. So if you go to the party sheet, or you're actually in this case, the combat tracker, it's good to have an NPC there so that when you're using this, you can tell what's happening. So I'll just take the combat tracker. I'm going to go see if I got anything loaded. Yeah, so here's the NPCs. I'm just going to grab one NPC. I'm going to grab this assassin here and put him on the combat tracker so I can see what's going on. And he doesn't have any actual line of sight per se, but one thing you got to remember is the lighting tool. So I think I'll show that while I'm here. So if I go to the back and unlock the map and go to the light tool, I can set the time of day. So this will be daytime. So I can set that on this and almost this entire map. There's no rooftop necessarily. It's out in the open for the most part. So I will take and add the ambient light. Right now it's set to, looks like dusk. So sundown, which is fine. I don't mind that. And then what I'll do is take this and I'll click away from any of these areas here. I'm going to add a mask, or in this case I don't have to because it's going to show on the whole entire map. But I want to put a mask over just this area here on the inner part of the map. So basically all of this is going to be under that mask, including this down here. So that is going to cover that. And then what'll happen is anything in here will either be affected or not, depending on the mask. So if you want to remove the mask, you can. So I've left that option there just in case I want to make this dark. That way I don't paint myself into a corner. And then I can change the visibility to all to off. So if I don't want to use the mask during gameplay, I can turn it off. But I wanted to put that in there in case. Because if you want it to be underground or if you want shadow, and that's something you have to think about. And then in your play options, you have to make sure that those are on as well. So now I'm going to put the assassin on this table here. So this menu here would be open, and that would also apply to any of these areas if you start up on top. So if you're going to be adventuring here and you're running this, if the players are on top of this area, then you're going to reveal these tops as they get close enough to see them. So I'm going to go ahead and just do that just to show you. So I open those areas up. So I'm going to drag the token onto the map. And as you can see, he's kind of grayed out. So let me make him visible because he's an NPC, not a player. And then for the actual line of sight, if I turned off the ambient lighting and turn it back on, this player, when you take possession of them, they're not going to be able to see very well when you have the tokens selected. They don't have any kind of light source. So that's what I'm saying. If you have the ambient light mask on, this is underground, they'd have to have a torch or something. So if I turn that off, he won't have to have a torch and he'll be able to see most of this area. But again, these areas here that are still blocking light, I mean, he could still see on top of that platform, but the ambient light is still being reflected. So depending on where the sun's coming from, and as you can see, that's where these shadows are coming from, is some of these higher platforms. So when you're going to do like a skill check, you can roll and then you can have them move across here. What will happen is if they get stuck in this area here, they can't move out of that area. Basically, as the GM, you have to hold shift and drag them out of there. or you can toggle this so that the players can move through it if you want. So it just depends on your play style and how you want to run it. But basically, that's how that works. So that's how you test it at the end. And like I said, I'm still going to go back and adjust some of these lines. I still have some cleanup to do, but I just wanted to give you an idea of how that this. So this is a very simple map. It's not as complex as some of the other ones, but there are layers here. So like you have this deep down layer, and then you have this regular layer, and then you have these upper layers. So that's why I did it that way. So you kind of have a 3-tier viewing. So if you're down here, let's say you're this assassin, and you're down here, you would turn this off. The line of sight should be turned off here. That way, when you're using this, so right now it's closed. So when you come through here, you shouldn't be able to see over the top of it. You have to go